Welcome. I'm Lee Cowan, and this is Here Comes the Sun, a closer look at some of the people, places, and things we bring you every weekend on Sunday morning. Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock made history as the first African-American elected to the U.S. Senate from Georgia. John Dickerson met up with the preacher and the politician in Atlanta.
What's the difference between a political speech and a sermon?
Oh, for me, I don't know that there's much difference.
Medicare is the law of the land.
Senator Warnock made history last year when he became the first African-American elected to the U.S. Senate from Georgia.
More exclusive excerpts from their conversation coming up a little later in the show.
You talked about your children. Do you think their generation will be better than yours?
I hope so. I think we all want our children to be better off than us.
Hope, but not certain.
I think that we have to do the work. Dr. King used to say that change doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We have to do the work. We have to bring our own story and our own challenges, and we have to be vulnerable enough to one another for change to happen.
Then Rita Braver takes us on a journey inside, quite literally, the work of artist Henri Matisse.
For the first time since Matisse created the Red Studio, almost all the works depicted in the painting have been reunited. This painting here on the top looks kind of like a small painting, but that's it over there, isn't it?
Yes. It's called Le Luxe, too, French word for luxury. And it's kind of a utopian scene of these figures kind of relaxing.
Is that a sort of a portrait over there, would you say?
Yes, it's called The Young Sailor, too, and it was made of a young fisherman. So if you look at this painting, that young sailor has no eyes or mouth, whereas in the painting, the eyes and mouth are incredible.
That's all coming up right here on Here Comes the Sun. A Way Out of No Way is the title of Senator and Reverend Raphael Warnock's new memoir. As John Dickerson learned, it's also an idea that fuels his faith and his political philosophy.
Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock.
Raphael Warnock might have two job titles.
You elected me, you joined my congregation.
But spend enough time with him and you'll see a lot of overlap between the preacher and the politician.
Mr. President, you have the power, you have the ability, cancel some of this student debt. Transform people's lives, give them a chance.
What's the difference between a political speech and a sermon?
Oh, for me, I don't know that there's much difference.
Medicare is the law of the land.
Senator Warnock made history last year when he became the first African-American elected to the U.S. Senate from Georgia, a state that had two segregationist senators when he was born in 1968.
Healing is in this house. Forgiveness is in this house. Insight and wisdom and knowledge and understanding. Whatever you need is in the house.
Reverend Warnock's other job title is senior pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church, the storied Atlanta congregation where John Lewis worshiped and where both Martin Luther King Sr. and Jr. were pastors.
I'm not in love with politics. I'm in love with change. Politics is, for me, a tool. I got involved in something as messy as politics with the hope that I could continue to work on the issues that I've worked on anyway.
Warnock and fellow Georgia Democrat John Ossoff were elected to the Senate in a runoff election last year, giving Democrats 50 votes and control of the Senate when Joe Biden became president. Whether or not Democrats can hold on to that majority this November will once again rest in large part on what happens in Georgia, where Warnock faces a tough re-election fight in a race Republicans hope will be defined by Joe Biden's low approval ratings. To escape from the gloomy national environment, Warnock, like all Democrats, will have to distinguish himself. It helps to have a good biography, something the senator is highlighting in his new memoir, A Way Out of No Way.
Anytime you walk into a sanctuary like this on any Sunday morning, at some point, there's a good chance that the preacher or somebody in the choir or somebody who's giving a testimony is going to say, God makes a way out of no way.
Is there anybody here who knows that our God can make a way out of no way?
And it's a kind of faith in the black church born of struggle. The recognition, first of all, that sometimes we find ourselves in impossible situations. You keep pushing, you keep pressing, and even as you make your way, God makes a way out of no way.
Warnock, the son of pastors, was raised in public housing in Savannah, Georgia. His mother once picked cotton. His father, who earned money collecting people's junk, is a frequent subject of Warnock's stump speech.
My dad would wake me up every morning. 6 o'clock, didn't matter whether it was a school day or the weekend. Get up, get dressed, put shoes on.
That was his sermon every morning.
What did that mean to you then, and what does it mean to you now?
I think it's a sense of readiness of, I don't know exactly what the day is going to bring, but somehow I'm going to make a way out of no way.
Like Martin Luther King, Warnock graduated from Morehouse College. He became pastor at King's former church in 2005. Warnock invokes his hero often on the campaign trail,
the senator from Georgia,
and on the Senate floor.
Dr. King's words are as true now as they were back then.
But this fall, that might not be enough to counter headwinds for Democrats like rising crime and high inflation. Warnock will face off against Republican Herschel Walker.
And in order to stop Biden, we have to defeat Warnock, plain and simple.
The legendary former football star who won a national championship and the Heisman Trophy while playing for the University of Georgia in the 1980s has been endorsed by Donald Trump.
I've known Donald Trump for 37 years, and I don't mean just casual ran into him from time to time.
Have you ever met Herschel Walker?
I have not.
He says you're running on separation. What's your response to that?
I think that the people of Georgia have a real choice in front of them about who's ready to represent them in the United States Senate.
Magician? I'm not. So in just a year in the Senate, did I think I could fix Washington? Of course not.
You're saying, I'm not a magician. Is that the difference between what you say in campaign and the reality of governing?
Oh, I was clear about the reality of governing when I ran, because I've been engaged in the work of change long before I got involved in politics. It's hard. It's slow. But you keep moving.
Hello, everybody.
Warnock stresses the rewards of passing the infrastructure bill and bringing down the cost of insulin and expanding Medicaid. Where Democrats might feel frustration, he takes a historical view about the nature of progress.
We can pass voting rights in this Congress.
Another issue that people care a lot about is voting rights. You, in particular, care a great deal about voting rights. It's why you're in Washington, to improve the situation. It hasn't improved.
Well, I don't know about that. I wouldn't say that.
Legislation has not passed to fix the problem.
The people of Georgia did an amazing thing. The state of Georgia stood up and in one fell swoop sent its first African-American senator and its first Jewish senator to the United States Senate.
For now, Senator Reverend Raphael Warnock's toughest job politically might be a lot like his toughest job as pastor.
Amen.
Trying to convince Georgians to have faith. Which is easier, to convince people that there is a God and to have hope in things unseen, or to convince people that they should trust that the political process will someday deliver a result that they want?
I just keep doing the work. I think we all have to get up every morning and do our work. Put your shoes on, as my dad used to say.
More from John Dickerson and Reverend Raphael Warnock coming up in just a few minutes. But first, Henri Matisse's famed The Red Studio, in a way you've never seen it before. He's now a universally acclaimed influencer of modern art, but Henri Matisse's work, even some of his most famous pieces, weren't always celebrated at the time. Rita Braver paints the picture for us.
It is one of the landmark paintings of the early 20th century. Henri Matisse's The Red Studio, his depiction of his workroom filled with paintings and sculptures, even a plate, all of his own making.
He's sharing his world with you. He's inviting you into his private space.
How long did you work on it? And curator Ann Temkin of New York's Museum of Modern Art is taking us into a remarkable new exhibit. Your eye is drawn to this.
It's powerful.
It is really powerful. For the first time since Matisse created the Red Studio, almost all the works depicted in the painting have been reunited. This painting here on the top looks kind of like a small painting, but that's it over there, isn't it?
Yes. It's called Le Luxe, too, French word for luxury. And it's kind of a utopian scene of these figures kind of relaxing.
Is that a sort of a portrait over there, would you say?
Yes, it's called The Young Sailor, too, and it was made of a young fisherman. So if you look at this painting, that young sailor has no eyes or mouth, whereas in the painting, the eyes and mouth are incredible. What he's done is a little bit softened the presence of the young sailor in this picture so it doesn't dominate, it kind of harmonizes with the others.
Today, Henri Matisse is considered a trailblazer in the development of modern art. But in 1911, when he created this painting in his newly constructed studio just outside Paris in Issy-les-Moulineaux, his work was not universally praised, not even within the art community, was it?
It's almost impossible for us 100 years later to wrap our heads around how reviled and disparaged an artist like Matisse was when he was 40 years old.
In fact, the Red Studio was commissioned by a wealthy Russian, Sergei Shukin, who did collect other Matisse works. But when he saw it,
he did not understand what was this flat picture, what were these elements that didn't seem to have background or foreground, and he rejected the painting.
Still, Henri Matisse believed in the work, showing it with no sale at several exhibits, including the famed New York Armory Show of 1913. It was finally purchased in 1927 for a London nightclub, and then ended up in New York, where MoMA bought it some 2 decades later.
It was $29,000 at the time, which is more than 10 times that in today's money.
And how much would it be worth today?
Priceless today.
You'd never sell it.
And not an issue.
As analysis in the museum's lab illustrates, Red Studio was not always red. Layers of an earlier version with orange, pink, and blue sections can be seen underneath, applied before Matisse decided to overlay everything with red.
Did he do it impulsively? Was it something he sort of really struggled with over a couple of weeks first? But the thing is, once he did it, there was no going back.
Tracking down all these works took almost 4 years. This one of a cyclamen plant is owned by a private collector and hasn't been seen in public since 1965. Is this one of the paintings that was difficult or easy to persuade the owner to loan to the show?
We were very fortunate. There was agreement right away. I mean, with this exhibition, if we had had one no, the whole concept would have fallen apart. We're just so grateful to everybody who, came aboard.
I'm going to ask you sort of a devil's advocate question. I think some people may hear about this exhibit and say, oh, it's just a stunt.
Yeah, come see, come see.
But as I describe in my book, my first encounter with racial profiling was as a 12 or 13-year-old in a grocery store.
After the break, more with Senator Raphael Warnock. Stay with us.
Preachers' kids were in the store on a Sunday afternoon after church, getting ready to go to the second service.
Welcome back. As promised, here's more John Dickerson and Raphael Warnock.
You write in your book about the skills you learned having that many siblings, of making jokes and ribbing them. I mean, what was that like, having a family structure like that?
There was just a lot of love in my house. And I learned early on that if we're going to work it out, we've got to look out for one another. I'm among the two youngest, so my older siblings looked out for us. They called us the babies because the closest in age is a few years older than me. So my sister, my younger sister Valencia, and I, we grew up together. We're less than a year apart. But yeah, a lot of love in my house, and it gave me a warm childhood, a sense of security, I think, and a lot of positive reinforcement. Early on, my parents were very affirming of me and of my gifts and promise. I remember being told that I was smart. You know, I think, I don't know if kids are smart and then we tell them, or we tell them and then they show up like people who are smart. And so that sense of confidence was helpful and got me ready.
So you grew up or you were a teenager in the 80s.
Yeah.
Did your parents ever have the talk with you?
Yeah.
What was that like?
There was a sense that as a young black boy growing up, I had to be careful. And I was a good kid relatively. I stayed out of trouble anyway. But I did drive when I was 16, and yeah, my parents had to talk with me that parents have with their kids all across this country about what to do if you pulled over. Yeah.
And did you ever have any incidents where that training was necessary?
Well, yeah, I had one or two too many speed tickets probably as a college student driving back and forth from Atlanta to Savannah. But as I described in my book, my first encounter with racial profiling was as a 12 or 13-year-old in a grocery store. My sister and I and some other PKs, as we were called, preacher's kids, were in the store on a Sunday afternoon after church, getting ready to go to the second service because you spent all day in church. And we were in the store. And when I was about 12 or 13, I had a habit of always having my hands in my pockets, kind of adolescent awkwardness. And out of nowhere, a guy walks up in a camouflage outfit and says, "Come with me." And my sister starts walking, responding to authority. I stop her and say, "Wait a minute, who is this guy?" And he says, "I'm the police." I said, "Well, do you have a badge?" And he showed his badge and said to me, "Is that okay with you?" And marched us all the way to the front of the store, up the stairs where they'd been watching us from an observation booth, and frisked all of us because my hands were in my pockets. It was demeaning. It was embarrassing. You know, it's something we see time and time again, and it's something that informs my work in the U.S. Senate. We've got to find a way that brings people together. And so I spend my time trying to figure out how we bring people together. How do we get past these old problems?
Right, which are still around. These old problems.
Sure.
Yeah. On election night, if you win, what will have happened? What will you have convinced the electorate?
Well, I can tell you that serving as the United States Senator, the junior United States Senator from the state of Georgia, is a high honor of my life. It is an extension of my lifelong commitment to service. And I honestly still wake up every morning, or most mornings certainly, and I pinch myself because it's incredible to me that I get to do this job. It is a high honor for the people of your state to say, we want you to represent us and our children and our parents and our grandparents at the highest level in government. It's a sacred trust, one that I take very seriously. work that I'm honored to do, and I hope to have 6 more years to do it.
You talked about your children. Do you think their generation will be better than yours?
I hope so. I think we all want our children to be better off than us.
Hope, but not certain.
I think that we have to do the work. Dr. King used to say that change doesn't roll in on the wheels of inevitability. We have to do the work. We have to bring our own story and our own challenges, and we have to be vulnerable enough to one another for change to happen.
When you were born, there were 2 segregationist senators in Georgia. Now you're running against another African American. What does that tell you about change in America?
Oh, I think it's an amazing thing that Georgia sent a black senator and a Jewish senator to the United States Senate in one fell swoop. And I think somewhere in glory, Martin Luther King Jr. and Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel are smiling because they marched alongside one another. Rabbi Heschel said that when he marched alongside Dr. King, he felt like his legs were praying. And what we need right now in this moment in America is people who pray not only with their lips, but with their legs, who stand shoulder to shoulder, regardless of race or class or sexual orientation or geography, and recognize that we're all in this together.
So given your various different lines, what do we, are you Senator Warnock, Reverend Warnock, Senator Reverend Warnock? What do you get called?
So, some folks call me Senator Warnock, some call me Reverend Warnock, Senator Reverend Warnock. I say call me when it's time for lunch.
I'm Lee Cowan. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you here next time on Here Comes the Sun.